Dr. Marsh didn't move. He held the folded lab slip in his hand and just looked at it, then looked at me, and for a moment neither of us said a word. I've stood in a lot of quiet rooms in my life, but that kind of quiet has a weight to it, the kind that presses on your chest before anyone said a single thing. My grandson Wyatt, 6 years old, was slumped against my arm in that plastic clinic chair, out cold, breathing slow and even, a stuffed dinosaur wedged under his chin. It was 3:40 on a Wednesday afternoon. Kids don't sleep like that at 3:40 on a Wednesday unless something's wrong. Mr. Callahan, Dr. Marsh finally said, "How long has he been drinking from this water bottle?" I looked down at Wyatt's face, slack and peaceful in a way that had nothing to do with peace. "I don't know," I said. "That's why I brought him in. If you're new here, welcome. I tell stories about family, about the things people do when they think nobody's watching, and about what happens when somebody finally does. If this one gets under your skin the way it got under mine, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Now, let me tell you how I ended up in that clinic. My name is Walter Callahan. I'm 68 years old. I spent 35 years driving long-haul freight before my knees gave out on me, and I've got one grandson in this world, Wyatt, my daughter Claire's boy. Claire's husband, Marcus, died 4 years ago, motorcycle accident on I-40, and since then it's just been the two of them, Claire and Wyatt, in a rental house out in Bartlett, a suburb east of Memphis. I check on them every chance I get, not because Claire needs checking on, she's tougher than she looks, but because a man my age with only one grandchild learns to treasure ordinary Tuesdays. That particular Wednesday, October the 7th, I wasn't even supposed to be there. Claire had texted me the night before asking if I could pick Wyatt up from kindergarten because she had a job interview she couldn't move, some marketing position downtown that would have solved a lot of her money troubles. Of course I said yes. I'd have said yes to picking him up from the moon. I got to Ridgeline Elementary at 2:45, signed him out at the front desk, and there he was, backpack half off one shoulder, dragging his feet like he'd run a marathon, instead of sat through a spelling quiz. "Hey, Butts," I said, crouching down to his level the way I always do. "How was school?" He shrugged. Didn't look up. Fine. Now, Wyatt is not a quiet kid. Wyatt is the kind of kid who narrates his own life out loud, tells you about the dinosaur facts he learned, the kid who got in trouble for talking during nap time, the color of the bug he found on the playground. A one-word answer from Wyatt is like silence from anybody else. It means something's off. I buckled him into his booster seat in my truck, an old Silverado I've had since Clinton was president, and I watched him in the rear view the whole drive. His eyes kept drifting shut, head lolling against the window, and every time they'd flutter back open for a second before sliding closed again. I told myself it was just a long day. Kindergarten will wear a kid out. I told myself that the way you tell yourself lots of things when you don't want to look at what's really in front of you. We got to Claire's house around 3:15. I let us in with the spare key she'd given me, and I got him a glass of water from the kitchen because his lips looked dry, and I sat him down at the little table in the den where Claire keeps his crayons and his coloring books. He drank about half the glass and just stared at the table, not coloring, not talking, just staring like the room was moving slower than it should have been. "Wyatt," I said, sitting across from him. "You feeling okay, bud?" He looked up at me, and something in his face shifted, some small door cracking open that I don't think he even meant to crack. "Grandpa," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "is it okay if I don't drink the special juice today?" I kept my face still. I've driven 18-wheelers through blizzards in the Rockies without my hands shaking, and I kept them still then too. "What special juice, bud?" "The one Mommy's friend gives me. He says it helps me be a good boy for nap time." His eyes were heavy, fighting to stay open. "It makes my legs feel funny, and I don't like nap time anymore. I keep having weird dreams." "Mommy's friend, not Mommy. Mommy's friend." I did not raise my voice. I did not let one muscle in my face move different than it had a second before. I just reached over and put my hand on top of his small one on the table. "You don't ever have to drink anything that makes you feel funny," I told him. "Not ever again. You hear me?" He nodded, eyes sliding shut again, and within 2 minutes he was gone, head down on his folded arms right there at the coloring table, breathing slow and deep in the middle of the afternoon like it was midnight. I did not call Claire. I did not call the police. I want to be honest with you about that, Because some of you are going to want me to have torn that house apart right then and there, and I understand the impulse. Believe me, I felt it too, sitting in my chest like a fist. But 35 years behind the wheel of a truck teaches you something about the difference between a reaction and a decision. A reaction gets you a jackknifed rig on black ice. A decision gets you home. First, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I carried Wyatt out to my truck, buckled him in, still asleep, and drove to Baptist Memorial's urgent care off Walnut Grove, a place I trusted because they'd stitched up my own hand 2 years back without an ounce of nonsense. I carried him in, told the desk it was urgent, and a nurse got us back within 10 minutes. That's where Dr. Marsh came in, a younger man, maybe 40, careful eyes, the kind of doctor who listens with his whole face instead of just nodding along while he thinks about his next patient. I told him everything, word for word, the one-word answers, the staring at the table, the whisper about the special juice from Mommy's friend, the way his legs had gone soft under him like a puppet with cut strings. Doctor Marsh didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he looked at Wyatt, asleep on the exam table with his dinosaur tucked against his cheek, and he ordered a full toxicology panel. "We'll know something in about 40 minutes, he said. Those 40 minutes were the longest of my life, and I've sat through some long hours in a truck cab waiting out a storm on the side of I-70 with nothing but static on the radio. I sat in that plastic chair, and I thought about every phone call with Claire over the last 2 months where she'd sounded a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. I thought about the new perfume I'd smelled on her jacket the last time I hugged her, something I didn't recognize, something that wasn't the vanilla stuff she'd worn since she was 17. I thought about how she'd mentioned, almost in passing, that a friend from her old job had been so helpful lately, helping with Wyatt on the days she had appointments or interviews. I hadn't thought a thing of it at the time. Grief makes people lean on whoever's standing nearby. I understood that. I'd leaned on people myself after my wife Dorothy passed. The door opened. Dr. Marsh came back in holding the results, and he did that thing again, that stopping, that 4 or 5 seconds where he just looked at the paper and then looked at me before he said anything. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "how long has he been drinking from this water bottle?" "I don't know," I said. "That's why I brought him in. What's in it?" He sat down across from me and turned the paper so I could read it. Diphenhydramine, the same active ingredient in Benadryl, something plenty of parents use for allergies or the occasional restless night, perfectly safe in the right dose for the right reason. But the levels in Wyatt's system, his exact words, were consistent with regular, repeated administration well beyond what any legitimate use would call for. Not once. Not an accident. Repeated. "Is his mother home right now?" Dr. Marsh asked, quiet. "I imagine she's still at her interview," I said. "Or on her way home." "Mr. Callahan, I'm required by law to report this." "I know you are," I said. "I'm asking you for 24 hours before you make that call. I need to understand what I'm walking into before anybody walks into anything." He studied me a long moment, the same way you size up a stranger you're deciding whether to trust with something heavy. Whatever he saw in my face, and I like to think it was a man who'd learned patience the hard way, must have satisfied him some. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, he said. "If I haven't heard from you by then, I make the call myself." "Understood." We shook on it. I carried Wyatt to the truck, dinosaur and all, and I drove the 19 minutes back toward Bartlett with the windows cracked and the radio off, letting the quiet do its work the way quiet does. By the time we pulled into Claire's driveway, I had already decided one thing. Wyatt was not spending another night drinking anything out of that refrigerator until I knew exactly who Mommy's friend was. Claire's car wasn't there yet. I let us back inside, got Wyatt settled on the couch with a blanket, and I sat down in her kitchen and I looked around at a life I thought I understood. Bills on the counter, a stack of them, red stamped past due on at least 2. A grocery list in Claire's handwriting with half the items crossed off, the cheap half kept, the name brands crossed out. My daughter was drowning, and I hadn't noticed, because she'd gotten so good at looking like she was swimming. Claire got home at 5:30, keys jingling, calling out that she thought the interview went well. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me sitting at her table in the dark with the lamp off. "Dad? What are you doing here? Is everything okay? Where's Wyatt?" "He's asleep on the couch," I said. "We need to talk." I did not tell her everything that night. I want to be clear about that. because some of you watching are the kind of person who'd have laid it all out on the table right then, and maybe that's the right way for some people. It wasn't mine. I've learned that when you hand somebody a truth too big to hold, they drop it, and sometimes they drop it on the very person you're trying to protect. So I asked her one question. Who's the friend that's been helping you out with Wyatt on your interview days? Her face did something complicated. Something between relief that I hadn't asked, something worse, and confusion about why I was asking at all. Derek, she said. He's, he's a guy I met a few months back. At the coffee place, actually. We just started talking. He's been really great, Dad, honestly. He's been such a help since, since everything. How great, I said. Not a question. A statement, flat and even, the same tone I used to use talking a rookie driver down off a ledge on a bad stretch of highway. She heard something in it. Mothers hear things, and daughters hear things in their father's voice too. What's going on? She asked. I'll tell you everything, I said, but I need one more day. Can Wyatt stay with me tonight and tomorrow? Grandpa time. I feel like I haven't had enough of it lately. She was tired and worried, and she didn't push, which told me something too, that some part of her already knew there was a version of this conversation she wasn't ready to have. She said yes. I got Wyatt's overnight bag together myself, and I made sure that water bottle, the blue one with the cartoon shark on it sitting on the counter, never left that kitchen. I left it exactly where it was. That night, at my place out in Cordova, I didn't sleep either. I sat in my recliner with the lamp on low and a cup of coffee going cold beside me, and I thought the way I used to think through a bad diagnostic on a rig that wouldn't start, working the problem backward from the symptom. What did I know? My grandson had been drugged, repeatedly, by someone his mother trusted enough to hand him over to. What didn't I know yet? Who this Derek really was, how long it had really been going on, and whether Claire had any idea at all. Thursday morning, I called a man named Russell Voss, an attorney I'd used years back when my late wife's estate got tangled up with her sister's family. Russell doesn't waste words, and I've always respected that in a man. I laid it all out for him, the clinic report, the tox screen photographed on my phone, Wyatt's whispered confession at the coloring table. Russell put his glasses on, read through it twice, and looked up at me. Walter, you understand what this is? I do. Child endangerment, at minimum. Possibly worse depending on what we find about duration and intent. Does Claire know? Not yet. Not the details. Good, he said. Before you tell her, you want this airtight. When a mother hears something like this about a man she's let into her son's life, and possibly into her own life, her first instinct is going to be denial, or worse, defending him. You want the evidence solid enough that denial isn't an option. What do I need? The medical records you've already got. If you can find receipts, purchase records, anything showing this Derek bought the medication or had access to buy it, and eyes on him, who is he, really? He slid a card across the desk. Priya Anand, private investigator, works out of Cordova, does most of her work for family attorneys like me. She's fast and she's careful. I pocketed the card. One more thing, Russell said. When Claire asks for Wyatt back, don't stall. Keep him with you as long as you reasonably can. But don't create a fight over custody yet, not until we've got the facts. Let her come to the truth herself if we can manage it. It lands different that way. I called Priya Anand from my truck in the parking lot. She could meet Friday. Wyatt stayed with me Thursday night and Friday, and I watched something in him come back to life those 2 days that I hadn't realized had gone quiet. Thursday evening, he told me 41 facts about the Cretaceous period, unprompted, at the dinner table, and I sat there and let every single one of those facts wash over me like the best sermon I'd ever heard, because it meant the boy underneath the sleepy, slow-moving kid from the coloring table was still in there, whole and unbothered. He slept normal both nights, waking on his own around 7, bright-eyed, hungry, himself. Priya called me Friday afternoon. Mr. Callahan, I've got something. You free? I met her at a diner on Germantown Parkway 20 minutes later. She had a laptop bag and a manila folder, and she didn't waste time on small talk, which I appreciated. Derek Allen Whitfield, she said, sliding a printed photo across the table, a man maybe 35, good haircut, the kind of easy smile that comes cheap. He doesn't work at any coffee company or consulting firm, nothing your daughter probably thinks he does. He's got 2 prior arrests, one for prescription fraud in Nashville 4 years back, charges dropped on a technicality, and one for check kiting that he pled down to a misdemeanor. No steady employment I can verify in the last 3 years. How's he been supporting himself? I asked. That's the interesting part. She opened the folder. Inside were photographs, time-stamped, a woman I didn't recognize handing Derek an envelope outside a check-cashing place on Summer Avenue, and behind that, photos of Derek at Claire's house on 2 separate afternoons. Going in through the side door with a grocery bag, staying for hours at a stretch, leaving well before Claire's car turned back onto the street. He's not her boyfriend in any traditional sense that I can find, Priya said. From what I've pieced together talking to a couple of people who know him, Derek runs a small operation, if you want to call it that, where he ingratiates himself with single mothers who are struggling financially, offers to help with childcare, sometimes offers cash outright as a loan, gets close, gets trusted, and then it turns out the help comes with conditions. What kind of conditions? Money, mostly. Or access. In your daughter's case, it looks like both. She turned another photo around, a copy of a check, Claire's signature, made out to Derek for $600 memo line blank. There are at least 4 of these over the last 3 months that I could trace through her bank's public fee disclosures, and one conversation with a teller who remembered her casino night fundraiser, her words for it, though I don't believe that's what it actually was. I sat with that. Not out of anger first, though the anger was there, sitting low and patient in my chest like a diesel engine idling. First it was grief. My daughter, alone since Marcus died, desperate enough for help and for company that she'd let a stranger with 2 arrests and no job walk into her house and into her son's afternoons. Why the medication? I asked. Why drug the boy at all? Priya's face didn't change, but her voice went quieter. Best I can tell, piecing together the timeline, Derek needed Wyatt out of the way during his visits. Easier to have a private conversation with your daughter, easier to go through paperwork, whatever he's really doing there. If a 6-year-old isn't underfoot asking 41 questions about dinosaurs, he's not been shy about telling neighbors Wyatt's a difficult kid, hard to manage, when in fact everyone I've talked to says the opposite. 2 adults, I thought. My daughter, blinded by loneliness and debt and the plain human need to not be doing this alone. And a man who saw all of that and decided the easiest thing to do about a 6-year-old boy was put him to sleep. I need everything documented, I told Priya. Every date, every dollar, every photograph in order. Already halfway there, she said. I drove home that evening with the windows down, October air smelling like cut grass, and the first real cold of the year coming in behind it. And I thought about 35 years of long hauls, nights when the whole rig felt like it was going to shake apart on a bad road, and how the only thing that ever got you through it was not panicking, just correcting, small movements, steady hands, eyes on where you were actually going instead of where the fear wanted to take you. Wyatt was asleep in my guest room when I got home, dinosaur under his arm, breathing easy. I sat in the doorway a minute just watching him the way you watch something you almost lost. Then I went to my kitchen table and got out the same notebook I used to log my mileage and my maintenance schedules for 30 years, and I started writing everything down, in order, in my own hand. Dates. What Dr. Marsh said. What Priya found. Every piece of it. I called Russell and left him a message. We're ready to move. Saturday morning, Claire called asking when she could get Wyatt back, and I heard something tired and a little defensive under her voice, like she already sensed she was being handled and didn't love it. I told her I'd bring him by that evening, and that I needed to talk to her, and that I needed her to hear the whole thing before she said anything back to me. I sat her down at her own kitchen table, the same one where I'd found Wyatt staring blankly 6 days before, and I put 3 things in front of her. The medical report, the bank records Priya had traced, the folder of photographs. She looked at the papers, then at me, the way you look at somebody when part of you already knows you're not going to like what's under the surface, but you haven't let yourself think the actual words yet. She picked up the medical report first. Read it slow. Her hand went to her mouth about halfway down the page. She set it down, picked up the bank records, and I watched her count in her head, 4 withdrawals, 600 each, and do the math on where 3 months of grocery money had actually gone. Then she opened the folder. She saw the photo of Derek walking in through her own side door, On a day she thought she was alone with her son at an interview, and she went very still, the way water goes still right before it starts to boil. "He told me," she said, voice barely holding, "he told me Wyatt needed a nap schedule, that kids his age need more sleep than we think, that I was probably underestimating how tired he got at school." Claire, I didn't know what was in it. Dad, I swear to you, I never gave him anything myself. He'd bring the water bottle already filled sometimes, said it was electrolyte stuff for after recess. "I believe you," I said, and I meant it because I'd watched her face when she read that report and there was no performance in it, only horror arriving in real time. "I need you to hear the rest of it, though." I told her about the arrests, about the check kiting, the prescription fraud, the pattern Priya had found of him doing this exact thing, single mothers, financial desperation, a foothold built on borrowed cash and stolen trust. I told her about the $600, 4 times over, memo lines blank. She didn't defend him after that. That's the thing I want you to understand, because I know some of you are waiting for the moment where she made excuses, where she chose him over her son the way it goes in some of these stories. She didn't. She put both hands over her face at that kitchen table, and she cried in a way I hadn't heard since she was 9 years old, and we buried her grandmother, deep and ugly and honest. And when she came up for air, she said one thing: "Get him out, today. Change the locks before Wyatt even comes home." I called Russell from her driveway. By Monday, Derek Whitfield had been served a cease and desist, and Priya's full file had been handed over to the Shelby County District Attorney's Office, along with Dr. Marsh's report, filed the moment his 24 hours had passed anyway, because that had always been the plan. Get the truth documented before the mandated report even landed so nobody could call it a misunderstanding. I want to tell you how it ended, and I want to tell you the real version, not the version with a soundtrack, because that's not how these things actually resolve. Derek Whitfield was arrested 3 weeks later on charges of child endangerment and, once investigators started pulling the thread, 2 additional counts tied to a woman in Cordova with a similar story, a single father this time, who'd been giving Derek cash for months, believing it was for a business opportunity that never existed. Turned out Wyatt wasn't the first child he'd sedated to clear a room. He took a plea deal rather than risk trial, 18 months, most of it likely to be served given his priors. Claire didn't press charges against herself, because there was nothing to press. She was a victim in this too, deceived and preyed upon at the loneliest point of her life, and I want anyone listening who's been in her position to hear me say that clearly. She spent 2 months in counseling that I'm proud of her for going to without me having to ask twice. She changed banks. She changed the locks Russell had recommended, and she changed something else too, something quieter, the reflex she'd built to hide the bills, to smooth over the cracks so nobody, especially not her own father, would see how much she was struggling alone. Wyatt doesn't remember much of it, thank God. Kids that age rarely do, not the specifics anyway. What he remembers is that Grandpa came and got him from school one day, and that they had a good couple of days together, and that he learned 41 new dinosaur facts that his grandpa actually listened to. What he remembers is safety, which is the only thing I ever really wanted him to walk away with. I still pick him up from Ridgeline Elementary most Wednesdays now. Claire and I talk every day, really talk, not the bright, rehearsed calls from before. Last week she told me about the new water bottle she bought him, plain, no cartoon shark, and how she watches him fill it herself every morning before school, just the two of them at the counter. No shortcuts, no help she has to keep secret, just a mother and her son, and an ordinary Tuesday that finally, actually, is what it looks like on the surface. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to trust your gut over somebody's easy explanations, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell me about a moment when you knew something was wrong before you could prove it. And I'll see you in the next one.